Hello and welcome to Tigers by the Fire, a podcast out of Holy Cross High School about World War II discussions and stories. This is Michael Arvites, and I'm here with Ian Doody.
Hey.
Ian is going to be the topic, I guess, of our first episode of the 2022-2023 school year. Ian was in the Albert H. Small Normandy Institute over the summer, and so he got to spend a week in Washington, D.C., and then a week in Normandy, France. And in this podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about the trip he was on, and then more specifically about some of the things that he learned, and even more specifically about the soldier that he wrote a biography on and gave a eulogy to in the Normandy Cemetery. So I'm going to let Ian kind of, I guess, talk at first about why you got into the program and why you thought it was an important thing for you.
So ever since I was little, World War II was kind of put into us as by my mom. We always kind of watched World War II movies, like everything World War II, books, literally everything. And ever since then, I've kind of always been interested in World War II. And my coach sent me an email one day regarding about this program that offered to take you to Normandy and to experience everything that happened in the Normandy invasion. And I couldn't say no. So,
and it was a pretty interesting program, I think, from the sense that this was the entire second semester that you had to work on these things. So what was that like, having to, attend lectures weekly that were given by, college professors, and then to write two pretty large papers, considering for a high school student?
It was very eye-opening, I would say, because these papers were somewhat near to a college level, I would say, in terms of formatting, in terms of material required. And I think it doing those papers and having to also go to school and deal with that at the same time, it kind of taught me how to manage my time effectively, and also just kind of gave me just a taste of what college would be like when I'm older.
I think that's always one of the neat things about that is balancing time and how well you can do at that. And you had to write about the Battle of Pegasus Bridge, and you gave a presentation on that. And the other research component was a biography on a soldier, Sergeant Ray, who's from Gretna, Louisiana, who you had a little history with. Can you talk about how you went about choosing what soldier to write about?
So initially, I've kind of always known Sergeant John Ray my entire life, and when I was little, I had an immune deficiency issue, and that basically meant I couldn't fight the flu or a sinus infection effectively. So I would kind of be in the hospital. I would have to get IV injections in order to help my immune system fight the flu or the cold or whatever. And as I said earlier, my mom was always kind of trying to get us interested in World War II. And so when I was in the hospital, my mom would make analogies regarding World War II to make what I was going through a little bit more understandable and to make it easier for me to, comprehend. And my mom sent a letter one day to the World War II Museum just thanking them, because World War II Museum has played a pivotal part in my life, because that's where I would spend the majority of my childhood, just in the World War II Museum, learning as much as I could. And or not even learning, just being there, because it's just fun. And my mom sent a letter to them thanking them for their impact on me, and just how much they mean to all of us as a family. And they posted that letter in their magazine, and we got a letter from a widow, from a veteran who died in the Normandy invasion. Little do you know, it's Sergeant John Ray. And his wife, Miss Paula Guidry, she emailed us. We had a correspondence for a really long time until she died, I think in 2019. And she sent me his patch, and it was just so cool for me as a kid to to be so obsessed about Normandy and everything, and then have a personal connection to that. So,
yeah, and I think the whole purpose of the trip, and the spirit of the Institute, is to remember the soldiers who died during the Normandy invasion. And Sergeant Ray, unfortunately, did die during the early stages of the Battle of Normandy. And I think it's really cool that you were able to bring in that from when you were a little kid, and then now as a junior going to be senior, being able to research him. That must have meant a lot to you to kind of put in and know that the paper that you wrote will be put on in the records for the Normandy Cemetery.
Yeah, what was really kind of stand out was just really kind of tell us how like Sergeant John Ray affects me. Like I have his picture and his patch displayed up in my room. It's like in a case, and it's just basically like a picture frame. And whenever I'm having any troubles or whatever, I just kind of look up to John Ray, and it means a lot to me, especially because he meant so much to me like as a kid, and he does now, and it's just being able to honor him, like I did, it just really, it's just powerful. It's very powerful.
And kind of speaking of John Ray, I think let's kind of go over his story a little bit, because obviously you did a lot of research into that, and his story I think is really unique in the sense that it is a well-known event, though he's not necessarily a well-known figure in that event. He was in, for I guess to get the background information, I'll let you get the big part of the story. John Ray was in the 82nd Airborne Division, and he participated in the invasion of Italy and was in Sicily as well. And he was in the first paratrooper landings the night of the D-Day invasions. And he is going to, his whole group is going to be off course by a couple of miles, right? And they're going to land in St. Mary Glees. And I'll let Ian kind of pick up his story from there.
So Ray's objective was to basically land in St. Mary Glees and secure it. And the reason why that was the reason why they had to secure St. Mary Glees was because it was a vital road junction to where if they seized St. Mary Glees, that meant the Allies could effectively move quicker into France. So what happened was he drops down, and it's complete chaos. There's spotlights up in the air. They're getting shot at as they're coming down. Men are dying even before they hit the ground.
Yeah, they were supposed to land outside the city. They're landing in the middle.
Directly in the middle. And there was the kind of bigger story there was that there was a fire that was happening due to a stray incendiary bomb, but that's, nobody really knows exactly what caused the fire. But so like a person, I forgot his name because they have it in the museum, but a person was parachuting, and basically the fire sucked him in. Like he got sucked into a burning building and he burned alive. And I think that just kind of displays like just the chaos of it all. But back to Ray, when Ray hits the ground, he's shot immediately. He's shot in the abdomen, and he is going to die. But in his dying moments, he saves his two comrades, Ken Russell and John Steele. And if you've seen The Longest Day, you guys, I think, y'all should know John Steele being stuck on the steeple, and just that very, very, very famous scene. And he saved both of their lives by shooting a German that was taking aim up at them. And he did. He shot the German in the back of the head. And
while he was bleeding from the abdomen.
Yeah, while he was bleeding out in his dying moments, saved John Steele. And Ken Russell, his other friend, who was on the side of the church, he cut his chute and he hit the ground and he broke his leg. But he wanted to go check up on John Ray since they were friends, and he checked his pulse and he was declared dead.
Yeah, and Ken Russell, I want to say he breaks his foot falling.
He breaks his leg.
Falling. And he hides off in a bush until the Germans have to retreat from the city, which they do. And for John Ray, his story obviously ends there, but he saves the lives of two of his friends, and there are pictures that we found of him with them prior to that event, obviously. And it's a really interesting story because Steele gets the famous thing, and he was paid to talk about that story, about how he hung there and faked dead and everything else. And it wouldn't have been a story if it wasn't for Ray's, I guess, determination.
And I think what's also kind of really important to mention is that Steele knew about Ray's sacrifice. His wife, he sent Ray's wife a letter saying, how Ray died. And it pretty much had said thank you, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Your husband saved my life. And if there's anything I can do, reach out. And you just kind of have to wonder, why didn't Steele mention that, to the greater public about The Longest Day? But, that's whatever.
I think the bigger picture of the story too is that this guy, and you read his letters back and forth to his wife, he definitely fits the bill of that soldier you see in movies where he's really
he's the stereotype. He's the American soldier as you see in movies.
Yeah, like he wants to, and he even writes back to her like, "We're going to do what we need to do, and this is the right cause, and all these other things." And it's really, I thought it was really interesting the research you did, and to see the relationship with he and his wife, because they wrote a lot of letters.
Yeah, they wrote over 300 letters, and I think that was just on Ray's side, sending 300 letters to her. She kept those letters locked away in I think a cedar chest in her attic. I think because Ray was always in her mind when, going out through her life after he passed. And one day after, I think after her other husband died, because she remarried after Ray, she got heavily invested into like spreading Ray's story around because she wanted to pay like as much respect to him as possible. And she made a book, and I think it's called Love Letters or a War II Story, I think. And yeah, it's a really, really interesting read because like it tells you how life was, I think, back then, because it's just completely different how she kind of talks about life. It just really shows like their love and affection towards each other.
I think it was good for you to do that research, and it seemed like it was really powerful. One of the big parts of the trip is that you go to the cemetery in Normandy, and if you haven't ever been to this cemetery, it is one of the most powerful places you can ever go. And we had some crazy moments, right? We had a French guy. He didn't speak any English. He was from France. And he stopped us and basically told us how much he loved Americans. How was that for you to say?
Yeah, he called us, he said like we were the liberators. I don't really felt like we liberated anything, but I mean,
and he was an old guy. He was in his. He was a kid during World War II.
Yeah, he definitely he definitely either saw the aftermath of it directly or was alive during it. But it just kind of tells you, because I think a lot of people in France don't really like Americans as much. But I think the people in Normandy, I think, since they're kind of really stuck, they really appreciate World War II and the Normandy invasion. They really love Americans, I think. So that was really interesting.
Well, and I think that was kind of interesting because sometimes when you hear about going to France, people talk about like people being like rude and inhospitable.
Yeah, they hate
like
Americans. Yeah,
all of the people in Normandy we seem to interact with seem to be very nice. Speaking of the cemetery, what was it like for you to see John Ray's grave and then to give a eulogy and then for halfway through the rain to start?
Yeah, it was. I don't know. It's kind of very hard to describe because like it's something that has been a part of your life ever since you were a kid, and actually just standing there and like, being, like 6 feet away from, a person that meant so much to you in your life. And, especially, it was just very powerful. And I mean, I choked up during the eulogy, and I mean, and I don't know, just seeing his grave and rubbing, I think, because what you had to do was for the eulogy, you had to take sand that was taken from the beach of just one of the beaches, and you had to rub sand into like the engraving. Pretty much.
It makes it more visible.
It makes it more visible, and just doing that, and just it was just very, very powerful, very powerful.
Yeah, and I thought that was just a really good moment, and you did a great job giving the eulogy. What about when we went into the museum part and then seeing an actual display of John Ray?
Yeah, so that was right after eulogy. So like I'm just kind of like, just kind of like very emotional, and I'm just because how much he means to me. And we walk into the museum, and I'm kind of complaining because it was raining, I'm cold and whatever. And I mean, we get to the end of the museum, and then I see this just like 10-foot display with this humongous picture of him. It's like 3 paragraphs just talking about what he did. And I was just like at a loss for words, because I mean, just it lit like my life. It was just like a full circle. It literally became a full circle, and it was just very, very cool to see that. Very, very cool.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the cooler moments. And then, of course, I mean, his display was right next to Teddy Roosevelt Jr.
Teddy Roosevelt Jr., yeah.
Who's probably, I think, the most famous person in that cemetery.
Yeah, and I think what's also, because the people who work there, the people who give tours, they knew about John Ray. Like one of the ladies, like she said that, like I routinely bring guests around to his grave because it's like his story's that interesting. And I think it's just really interesting to see how much he has more, I would say, attention in Normandy than he does in America, I think, because that's just,
Yeah, because we saw him on display in 2 different museums in Normandy, and I haven't ever seen him really, I think, on display in the United States. And hopefully we can, get something with the World War II Museum and maybe change that a little bit, because his story is really good, and it doesn't take a lot of room. It's just a good story. So the trip itself. Let's talk about this. What do you think are the benefits of learning about a topic in the place that it occurred? Like, how impactful was it? Because you've seen like Saving Private Ryan, and you've learned about D-Day your whole life. But what was it like actually being on Omaha Beach and seeing that tide in an hour come in by 100 yards?
Yeah, I think because you can never really know, I think, or truly learn about a subject of like history or experience it unless you're truly there, because you'll never really understand like the magnitude, or like you'll never understand what the soldiers had to go through. And I think because we went out, I think, pretty early in the day, and the water was like really far out, but they went at like, what time they go at? I think like
6, 7 in the morning.
And it was like an extra 100 yards. So it was just at an extra 100 yards pretty much to where we were. And just to think about how they had to just sprint through literally explosions, fire, like just literally everything.
And then the wounded on the beach, if they don't get moved, that tide's coming in every half hour.
Yeah,
by 100 feet.
It's just horrifying to really just see, and especially to go on the easy road sector and to look up at like the mountain pretty much, or like the high ground, and just to think like of what can be there. Like the guns, the like artillery guns, just like everything.
So when we were on, I think it was Omaha, you got to go up to the top of one of the little cliffs overlooking. You had to climb a little path. How difficult was that just to get up without getting shot at?
Oh yeah, it's pretty hard because it's like a couple hundred steps, and I was kind of out of breath doing it, but it's really hard to imagine springing across the beach, surviving that, and then on top of that to keep going and to climb just a small mountain, and with how many pounds a year on your back? It's
soaking wet.
Yeah, crazy to imagine.
And then I know we went down one of the draws, which was a fun activity.
So when we went, it was just moist. I would say like it really wasn't even that wet. And Dr. Long, who runs the program, like he almost slipped and fell, and like I think 5 people slipped and fell, and I almost slipped and fell. It was really funny, but that also kind of put in perspective too, because like they had to climb that, going up the opposite direction, holding a gun, using one hand to pretty much get up there, and that's just insane to imagine.
It puts a lot in perspective. And I know just being in Normandy, because we went all around Normandy, we were there for a week. We got to go into St. Mary Église, so we got to see where we think John Ray was probably shot.
Yeah, they had like the museum had his like spot picked out. Yeah,
and then we got to see hedgerows, and that gives you. Did that give you a different perspective of like the Battle of Normandy? Because in a textbook, the Battle of Normandy is a footnote. But this was one of the most violent battles in the U.S. Army's history.
Yeah, I think just kind of just looking at hedgerows, and I mean, just imagining as an American soldier what is behind that. Just imagining, okay, if I want to cross this street, okay, I have to think about not only the hedgerows where I could just run into a German division, or better yet, I could just run into a tank. And you could do nothing. And that's what was just so horrifying about the entire invasion.
One of the things that I mean, as a history teacher who studied this stuff a lot, that I dorked out over, was getting to see the remnants of the mulberries, the artificial ports that were made in Britain that they put in Normandy so that the British and Americans eventually could land equipment, and the remnants are still there. What was it like getting to walk around those or at least see those in the scope of them?
Yeah, I think it's just incredible to like see like just World War II, just remnants of World War II, because like in America, like there's really not that. We've never had an invasion like on our soil. There hasn't been bombs like dropped everywhere. But to seeing like, I don't know, craters and the mulberries, it's just kind of puts in perspective like how lucky, we are, and how great, like how, grateful I think we should all be that, our country wasn't bombed, invaded, and, it's just, just crazy.
And I know Point to Hawk, you liked that one a lot when we got there to see the Army Rangers had to scale the cliff.
Because you look at Omaha and you just imagine, gun emplacements that could be there, but just imagine having to climb up a hill, and just have to keep fighting after that. Because just even getting to these places, you're breaking a sweat, but just imagining what the Rangers had to climb and to, what their job was, it was crazy.
And we got to learn about on the trip. We got to see, this was something I hadn't really done on my previous trips. We got to see the British and Canadian sectors of the beaches, and we got to learn a little bit about the British and Canadian sacrifices. One of the areas that we went to was the Ardennes Abbey, which is the site of a massacre of Canadian soldiers. And in fact, we stood in the courtyard where they died. What was that like for you to stand in a place where a war crime was committed?
It's just terrible. It's just so terrible that how people could ever do this. It was really just you're just kind of at a loss for words when you get there, because to know you stood where 20 men were all shot in the back of the head.
And their pictures are all along the wall.
Their pictures are all along the wall, and to know how they were killed, it was such a terrible thing. They would bring up one soldier, you'd hear a gunshot, they wouldn't come back, and they say, "Hey, you come," and then they just they do that to the entire unit. And they talked about how even some of the men, when they knew they were going to die, they still held their head strong. They shook hands, they said goodbye, and I think that just kind of shows the bravery and the courage of all the soldiers who participated in the battles.
Yeah, I think that, again, getting the sense of empathy with what people went through, but also just an understanding of these events. And, I guess for you, what are your biggest takeaways from the trip as a whole?
I think the biggest takeaways of the trip is just to really just be grateful, I think, because for me, to be grateful because to know that stuff like this happened, to know that a war happened and these atrocities were committed, I'm just so grateful that, I have not had to participate in any of that. Anybody that I'm close to or friends or just people in general today have not had to deal with. But also I gained a tremendous amount of respect and just admiration for just soldiers in general, because soldiers are, especially back in World War II, they liberated us from Nazism, and I think that, and just to imagine what they had, what steps they took, and what they had done to them, it's just incredible. To really just be there and witness it all. So
yeah, and you have your brother's also in the military, so you have a little tie yourself.
I think it's kind of scary, to think what my brother might face up against, but it also gives me great respect for him because he's fighting, for us. He's fighting, for all Americans. So I'm really proud of that.
And I want to give you a little credit too, because you were not feeling well for about half our time in France.
Yeah,
your immune system caught up with you there.
Yeah, I don't know what I got, a sinus infection or something, and I felt terrible. Yeah, I felt really bad on Omaha. When we went to Omaha, I think I stayed in the bus for the first 30 minutes because I couldn't sleep at all, and then I walked out there and saw everything. But I think what was really funny was Coach Arvites giving chloroseptic at the pharmacy and asking for chloroseptic at the pharmacy. That was pretty funny to hear.
Yeah, my translation skills were top notch in the French pharmacy. And what was crazy was just how inexpensive it was in comparison to coming to a Walgreens in the US.
How much was it? It was
less than €5.
Yeah,
for something that would cost $18 here. Which I think is just it was hilarious. And then you muscled through Paris, and I didn't want to talk too much about Paris because that wasn't really the point of the trip. But what were your highlights in Paris?
Yeah, I think Museum d'Orsay.
Yeah.
That was incredible. That was just Starry Night. That was incredible. But I think just being in a city that old and just seeing on random buildings, they just have this 1,000-year-old statue sitting there and just go oh, okay, that's cool. And I think it's just really cool just to be where a lot of history was. So
Yeah, and I know you didn't like the people taking selfies in front of the self portraits.
I'll never understand it. People just wait an hour just to take a selfie when you just take a picture of it on your phone. But whatever.
Well, I know we're going to be doing probably a couple of presentations on Sergeant Ray, and I know you're going to do him proud, and you did him proud on the trip. And I guess that's really about it. We're going to talk about Pegasus Bridge, I think, in another thing. We might have to do a little Pegasus Bridge one, because that's a really cool story that I feel like Americans under the age of 40 don't really know much about Pegasus Bridge. Older Americans tend to, because they've seen The Longest Day. But you did a great job presenting on that and everything else. So do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I just no. Okay, I'll just say this, but I just think everybody, should at least try to go to Normandy at some point, because it is just a great experience to just see where the greatest naval invasion of American history, of all human history, occurred, and to know the sacrifices that they went through. So, yeah.
All right, Ian. Well, thank you, and I'm glad you enjoyed the trip. It was just as powerful for me to be there with you. So, this was Tigers by the Fire, episode 1 of season 3. Thank you.